I'm back.
All right. We're here at the Kink Tank, and I thought about doing my Casey Kasem voice, but I think I'll pass on that. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about leather contests. So I know we have, throughout the year, many different leather contests of many different shapes and colors, and I'd like to talk a little bit about them and what their impacts are in our community, what they are, and basically our thoughts on them. So who wants to get started? We got a big one coming up in our region, actually, coming up just a couple of weeks from now, Great Lakes Leather Alliance, beginning of October. And I know some of us here in this room are going to be there. What do you expect to see at a leather? First of all, let's just start with, what is a leather contest?
I don't think that's the answer. In its simplest form, a leather contest is a judged event that picks from a group of candidates, people who are chosen to represent that specific contest or subset of the community. So it might be a bar title where the title holder is representing his local bar. It might be a regional event where a contestant is representing their region, but usually in subsets like Ms., Sir, Boy, Boot Black. There's a variety of titles, but it's usually about representation.
Yay, we got Gypsy here. We have a title holder in the room. How about that? Tell us about your title, Gypsy.
I don't know, can you hear?
Oh, that's right, you got your headphones on. She's just looking there all pretty.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, she's just looking all pretty. I'm like, Gypsy, hey, welcome. Tell us about your title. And you're like,
Sorry, he had his headphones plugged in.
I realize that now. Sorry. So, you are a title holder. Which title is that?
Yes.
Can you hear us?
Which title is that?
Well, I am the current international puppy for the year 2016. It is the contest held by IPC. There's also another international puppy contest, but it's the puppy and handler contest. But that's what I am.
Okay, and what did you have to do to become a leather title holder?
It's actually not a leather contest. It specifically
for the puppy contest, do they actually make you jump through hoops?
Well, that's in the obstacle course section of it, but that's not fun.
Okay.
That's actually just
go
for
on.
fun. I actually held the hoop and stuff. But no, for the contest itself, you have to interview in front of a panel of judges that are chosen by the producers, usually people that are knowledgeable or somehow involved in the puppy community. You have to do a speech. You have to do an image kind of portion or how you look. There's also, for that contest, there's a puppy play scene that's an impromptu scene instead of a fantasy like you see in a lot of leather contests. And then I had to do some, this and that and the others during the contest event itself. So for the meet and greet, we had to sell raffle tickets and things like that that raised money towards the travel fund and the contest fees. So
cool.
That's what
For the person who's watching this who has no idea at all what a leather contest is, would it be fair to say that this is sort of analogous to Miss America or what you see on Honey Boo Boo or?
Well, yeah, but I mean, the reality of it is that they are very similar.
Pretty as Honey Boo Boo.
So this is a pageant of sorts. This is something where.
For me, my opinion is that a lot of the leather contests are based more on a person's ethics or morals or how they carry themselves that fit kind of what category they're running for better, more so than a you look prettier than all the other people on stage kind of contest. Those tend to be.
Right. It's not a beauty pageant per se.
Right.
I think some of them more than others, but there are a variety of different contests out there, but it's a similar format. So they say, now we're going to have the swimsuit section, and all the contestants come out in their swimsuits and, or some kind of, costume, or then they also have a speech, and sometimes they'll have like a talent section, for instance.
Yep.
So these are things that happen at leather contests for people who decide that they're going to put themselves up for the running, but because it's kinky and leather, they're not necessarily swimsuit talent or
Accent personality.
Sure, but your speech might be about creating a great scene rather than, world peace or genocide in the Sudan or something.
Well, it's interesting you would say that, because even at IPC, which is a puppy contest, one of the speeches was about reducing the instances of suicide in the gay and puppy community, and one of them was about HIV, continuing to work on reducing HIV, new cases of HIV infection.
Okay, and most contests, and these are what people in the contest circuit call platforms. It's
Correct.
so each contestant, for the majority of leather titles that I'm aware of, they want you to have some sort of platform, and that platform can be something you're involved with or something that's dear to you. If you are, vegan and meat is murder kind of person, and you think that all leather people should stop wearing cow and start wearing something else, make that your platform. That's what you give speeches about. That's what you might not be very popular, because a lot of us like dead cow, but I've heard domestic violence. There's the suicide thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be social change. For instance, it might be something a little more personal to you, or it might be or it might be just something that you want to improve about awareness, or the way our community treats certain things. It might be HIV or whatever. Are there any titles that we know of that don't require some kind of platform?
To be fair, I don't know that any of them require one. Most people do it because, as a representative with a patch, you tend to have more doors open for you in terms of speaking. So people generally take that as an opportunity to create a
They have the
platform.
megaphone, yeah. They have the bully pulpit now.
And rather than shouting about bitches and hoes, they generally will pick a topic that's important to them. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that is earth-shattering in terms of social justice, but it's generally something that's going to be important to them.
Okay. So what are some of the leather titles that are out there? Like, we have Gypsy here, who's International Puppy. There are a number of them out there. Sometimes in any leather bar that you go to, or any leather event that you go to, you'll see a wide array of back patches and sashes and insignias that say Mr. Cell Block 1997, or drummer, or Imsel, or all these different ones. So I'm thinking of like the granddaddy, which seems to be IML.
Yep.
Takes place Memorial Day weekend in Chicago, and that's a giant one with dozens of contestants. Of course, there's the female counterpart to that, Imsel, which is in San Francisco?
San Jose.
San Jose.
Yep.
And then there are also there's other circuits of titles as well. So we have this contest coming up in October for Great Lakes Leather Alliance, which is a regional contest that winners of state contests and local contests go to compete at. So here in Kentucky, we have Bluegrass Leather Pride, and we have a small contest here, and we choose our contestants. They are judged by a panel of invited judges on a variety of things, and the title that you are running for will dictate the types of questions that they ask you and the format of the contest itself.
Correct.
Then if you win the title, you go on in some circuits to compete at the next, or the regional, sort of the semifinals, if you will. Then it's a wider audience and a larger group of states in a larger area. Those people then converge on Indianapolis in October, the first weekend.
PLLA, for example, covers 9 states.
Right, and there are probably 7 regional contests altogether, or so, Mid-Atlantic,
and somewhere in there.
Southeast Leather Fest. There's a variety of these that cover different states. So then the winners of those then go compete at an international contest.
Correct.
So that might be International Master and Slave down in Texas, or it might be, depending on the title. If it's Master and Slave, or if it's International Power Exchange, that would be down in Florida at a different time of year. So there are many different circuits, and they have different requirements. So give me, for instance, Gypsy, do they have certain requirements for your title?
To run, there are actually no specific requirements. I went into the contest without previously winning another or having a title from another contest. It is not a requirement in that case that you either be sponsored or that you have a title. I know some contests require that you be at least sponsored, if not a current title holder competing at that level.
Mm-hmm. I know that some have, well, for instance, IMSL, International Ms. Leather. You need to be a woman, or you need to
female identified.
Female identified. Trans women are welcome to compete, but I cannot go and compete at IMSL.
Correct, and that was the thing with Gypsy's contest. There are no gender or sexuality requirements as there are in some other contests, but she is the first woman to have won that title.
Mm-hmm. Some contests, like the International Leather Sir and Boy contests, have requirements for that one you need to be a man, and then they also include trans men now, I believe.
There was a whole controversy about that, but yeah, it includes, it's all male identified.
But you also need to be gay for that title, correct?
Identify as gay, yes.
Okay. So a straight person they won't accept your application. There are pansexual titles out there, like the Olympus titles, for instance.
Yeah, and a new one, International Person of Leather.
International Person of Leather. That, it's pansexual. It's whatever you identify. Everybody's welcome. Generally, these also have some sort of age requirement, like 18, for instance. But other than that, you'd want to read and see. Not only that, but of these titles, and some of that we mentioned, and a bazillion of them that we haven't mentioned, they all have a different purpose to them, or let's say they've become certain types of titles. So, for instance, when we elect our Bluegrass Leather Boy and Sir, the title itself requires a barware section, which is basically like leather barware. But then there's also a jock section where they come out in their jock, and they're judged on their their poise, their look, how hot they are, and sometimes that is a little bit of a beauty pageant, but but it's also what people consider to be a play title. The questions that judges will ask the contestants often have to do with how they play, when they play, what the specifics about play. Whereas a master and slave title, they consider to be more of a teaching title, and that is, how are you going to educate the rest of our community?
Correct.
So for the person who's out there thinking like, oh, that might be something interesting to do, that might be something that I want to do, I would say it would be a good idea to pick a title that you qualify for one, that you that you fulfill all the requirements, but also that the type of title that it is something that jives with your kink and why you would want to be involved in something like this. So let's talk a little bit about why would somebody want to do this.
Well, I mean, it's always going to be different for different people, but the one thing that I have noticed, especially more recently, is the opportunity to speak on a platform, to have the opportunity to have a soapbox. Now, some people will compete because they are passionate about what they are competing for, right? So, for example, the Miz may be running because they are passionate about making sure that leather women have space in leather, at leather events, and so it's important for them to represent women in leather spaces. Bootblacks, for example, will compete because they are passionate about bootblacking and want to make sure that people out there get to, get exposure to that and understand what the bootblack culture is about and the importance they play in the leather community. As you said, master slaves, master slaves are a much smaller subset of the leather community, and it's something they want to make sure that people, that they keep fresh in people's minds, so that people are aware that there are resources out there to learn about these different kinds of communities and sub-communities and that kind of thing. So for some people, it is having the sort of extended voice. Like you said, a patch kind of gives you a megaphone in some ways. But for some people, it's just about the passion for what they are representing.
Right.
I think it's highly community involved. I mean, so you need to meet the requirements of applying, but I think also another almost requirement would be that the idea of community is important to you, because it always seems to me that people who run for titles or people who get involved with leather contests strongly identify with leather as a noun, but also leather as a set of values and a set of acceptable behaviors and just things that you should do, shoulds within a community. So I think a lot of people run for titles out of a sense of service to their community, that they can represent best, or they can represent well the values of that role, but also of that community in a very public way, in addition to running off of a specific platform.
Correct.
Yeah, and it's sort of it seems to me like it's not really like a recruiting thing, but bootblacks, for instance, it's an advocacy for your interests. That you can. With that megaphone that you have, or with that title that you've earned, and the travel that almost always entails, you meet a lot of people, and there are people that will come to you to say, I've heard about this, or just, for instance, what is bootblacking? I don't even know what that is. And it's something that you can, you have some sort of credentials now that people will be drawn to you to say, what's in that for you? Why do you do that? Is that something I would be interested in? And of course, nobody's going to be like, hey, we're an exclusive club and we don't need any more bootblacks. We are saturated on the bootblack. No, it is, yes, if you're it, and that applies to bootblacks, not just bootblacks and skills like that, but also the master-slave community, for instance, that, the more people that are aware of these types of relationships and what they get out of it, and the dynamics that they find so fulfilling, if they can help people find that for themselves, that's interesting.
I think there's a really interesting point, Michael, and that's that, you're talking about this, and I realize it's just a matter of language, but just to be clear, when you talk about leather titles, there are other kinds of titles that happen. But I think what's really interesting, and this came up literally yesterday, we were discussing somebody who was questioning the value of their particular title, that for some reason titles have this sort of ranking. Like you said, IML is the big one, and if you're not talking about IML, then why are you even talking about contests, kind of thing? Because there are some people who will sort of rate them, about how valuable they are.
So when International Mr. Leather walks into a room with International Leather Sir, they have a little bit of a like, who's,
well, and it's funny because
like in a Western.
And when you know a lot of international title holders, they tend to be a lot more mellow than sort of the reputation would give credit for. Last year's IML, Ramian, we met him at about a dozen events, and I don't think I've ever met anybody just sort of more mellow and cool and humble than he was, But the point I was trying to make, though, is that these people that run for titles, and let's just say in this particular case, specifically leather titles, don't just go to leather events. They travel to all kinds of events. And as you said, they are representatives for those communities. So the Leather Sir, Leather Boy, for example, when they go to a PAN event, like we were just up at Synergy in Michigan, the International Leather Boy was there. It's not a leather event. It is a pansexual, multi-gender, multi-sexual event where he gets to basically talk to people in the same way that you mentioned about bootblacks, about what the leather community is, but also what the gay leather culture is. It's about, I don't want to say advertising or recruiting, but really about information sharing. Because one of the things that you realize is that a bootblack title is sort of pointless when you're in a room full of bootblacks, right? You're preaching to the choir. So the point sometimes of these titles is to go into spaces where the titles that these people represent, or the communities that these people represent, aren't necessarily well represented in those other areas. And so it gives you a chance to go in and create a voice. I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of we as people understand that there are gay people in the world, but we have pride as a way for them to be able to bring that culture out to people who are not just gay. Like when you go to the Gay Pride Parade, it's not just gay people watching the parade. It is an opportunity to bring that culture out from that subgroup into a larger group. And that's what titles do a lot of times. is it allows you to take boot blacking from a boot blacking subculture into a broader environment, a broader group. It allows you to take, like you said, those values of sort of what they refer to as capital L leather into non-leather spaces so that people understand what those guys over in the corner are doing, because they've always seemed like a mystery to me. I always see them at the bar, but I don't know what they're all about. That's what these titles let you do, is talk to people outside of those communities and bring people in terms of understanding, not necessarily, like you said, recruiting and physically bringing them in, but bringing them in terms of broadening their understanding. The puppy contest, for example, when you go to a puppy contest, all the puppies who are there know what puppies are and know what the international puppy is, but it's going outside of those puppy environments, like to events like Claw or IML, where people may only know about it as a concept, but finally get a chance to be exposed to it and understand it a little bit better.
Well, it sounds really corny, but it is kind of a cultural advocacy effort. I mean,
It absolutely is.
This idea of tradition. It's not like it's an only oral history. It's not like somebody can find it in a book somewhere. Of course they can. But I think it's very much this idea of being an advocate for the culture, because the culture itself, it's not like leather people are readily recognizable as leather people at the grocery store. It's not like, walking around, the community has a really high level of visibility, and that's intentional. It's like the kink community. You don't walk out of your house dressed a certain way most days of the week, and there's a reason for that. You maintain a sense of privacy, you maintain a sense of, I don't know, I think a lot of communities like that take a sense of pride in being somewhat underground, for different reasons. So having an advocate who's more or less vetted by a community, where they say, you're a good guy or girl, we think you represent us well, and they go out there and they do that work.
Right, and a lot of this is sort of a vetting. You're basically boosting the person up to say, this is one of our spokespeople for this particular title or for this kind of lifestyle or dynamic that the title pertains to say they have been vetted. They've basically been quizzed and put on the spot and run through the ringer by a panel of judges who
and
are
generally
usually
more than one.
yes, usually title holders themselves, and have a special place. They've been advocates for this type of title before. So when you're running for a master and slave title, they're asking you questions to say, are you representative of what we feel like a healthy master and slave relationship is? Are you what we want to put forward as our new model, I guess?
And also, are you capable of doing it? Or do you do well with public speaking? How are you in crowds, right? I mean, that's one of those things that contests do. And I mean, there's a reason why they do an interview, right? What do you feel about these particular topics? And it's really to see if you were approached in a bar or an event by somebody who said, well, tell me about this master-slave thing. They have some sense of confidence that you know what you're talking about, or that you at least know how to be able to have an exchange with people. That's why they do the speeches, so they can understand, are people capable? Because if you ever go to events, you see this all the time. Oh, we've got 15 minutes to kill. Let's bring all of our title holders on and talk about what title you represent. You see that all the time. And if you don't have anybody, if you have someone who has stage fright, they don't make a good representative.
Right.
Yeah, and
You
I
need,
think
to be able to communicate.
Yeah, and I think too, an interesting thing about leather competitions like that, when you're running for a title, you don't just get on the stage and say your thing and then get off the stage and then you're no longer being looked at or being judged. The first contest that I ever went to, it was really funny. There was some controversy because somebody was running for a title. They got into an elevator with a judge. And I don't know that they realized that the judge was in the elevator with them, and they were saying some things. They were being very rude, basically, to everyone who was in the elevator. And it was really interesting because you hear them all the time talking about how whether you're on the stage or not, you're being looked at and your behavior matters.
Yep.
So if you're,
And now it's become even commonplace for people. You're first of all, you find out who your judges are going to be. Your judges find out who the contestants are going to be, and it's probably pretty common to go look through all their FetLife posts and to go look through, have a look at their Facebook and see what they're like when they're not under the spotlight, and see what kind of growth that they've had, over their journey in this up to this point. And yeah, those things, they don't want somebody who's acting nice for the judges on the stage. They want to know that they're getting a total package.
Correct.
There is an element to this too, and that is when you run for a title, there are certain obligations that some of them require you to meet or that they request of you to meet. So, for instance, when you run for Bluegrass Leather Serve and you win, on your application it's saying that if you win, you are promising to go to the next level, or that you have the intention of running for a regional title. You don't just get the title and then fall off the face of the earth. We want you to represent us at the next level. And along with those obligations also comes some other obligations, like, first of all, anybody that comes and asks you to teach or volunteer for something, you're voluntold, man. You just you can't be a title holder and say no. It's really hard unless you're already committed to something else. Not only that, but I also see that there is a mechanism in place, a machine at work here that it is also a feeder for judges for other contests. So
Correct.
in addition, you don't say no to judging a contest. That's something that you'll be called on a lot to do. You're supposed to be the spokesperson and some sort of authority on this topic, so you need to help out. Finding judges isn't easy. So, you know, the low-hanging fruit, the ones that really need to, you know, are the title. Well, they have, you know, this is part of the deal, is helping other contests, you know, to feed this machine that ultimately produces model leather people, I suppose.
But it's also up to the people that are deciding to run for a contest to be aware of what the requirements, if they do win the contest, are.
100%.
Yeah, and a lot of times, you know, for example, with my title, I only have really 2 requirements. Show up next year to give a step-down speech and hold 2 fundraisers for the contest to help recoup their costs that they have to go through for the year. I have no requirements to go to any certain events, to judge at any certain events, to do anything like that, but I'm choosing to go out and, you know, be in the community and stuff like that. But a lot of title holders that exist now, or new people, get wrapped up in the, well, so-and-so who was before me did all of this stuff, well, I have to do that plus 1, and stuff. Or people judge title holders on, well, so-and-so over, you know, in this state is going to 20 events, and you only went to 3 events. You know, you're not a good title holder. That may not be their requirements or what they're capable of doing, and they may do a lot of stuff that is online or more in person, one-on-one and stuff like that, and so you may not see some of the stuff that some of the title holders do, but they may still be doing and making an impact even though they're not out in the public all the time.
Mm-hmm. And nobody likes a lousy title holder.
No.
Nobody likes a title holder that snatches the sash and then disappears.
No.
In fact, you might get it revoked, even if you fulfill your minimum requirements.
Yep.
So, you know, there's a certain sense of that afterward. We chose you. So, and Gypsy, it sounds like you've got some sort of minimal requirements, you know, the step down speech and a certain number of fundraisers. But then there are some of them that are, you will go on to compete at the next contest. Mm-hmm. You will attend a certain number of national events.
Yeah.
That you'll have a presence, that you won't, you know, just, well, I won my title, so now I can go back to, you know, doing nothing for the community.
And they can be really onerous. Like, I know one contest that's the regional contest. The expectation is that the title holder for that regional contest will go to an event in every state that region represents over the course of a year. Mm-hmm. Okay, that seems reasonable. But this regional title covers 11 states.
That's a lot of events and a lot of travel.
Right? That's 11 states in the course of a year. I mean, even if you did one state per month, that's a big trip every month, depending on how far you're going.
All right. So why would somebody do this? Okay, you've got a title, you've got some kind of cred, you've got the ornaments of your station, you feel proud, but there is quite a laundry wringer that you run through to get this. You know, tell us a little bit about some of the work that's involved and what, it's not just, hey, I think I'll do this, so I'm going to stand up on a stage and answer. I mean, there are preparations, there's a lot of travel, there are fundraising, there are sponsorships to be had. There is a lot of work. This isn't something that people on a lark say, you know what, I want to be Imzel. So what do I do first? Do I just go to San Jose and stand up on a stage? No, there is an entire process, and it's not something to be taken lightly either.
No, and I think one thing that people don't realize about titles that's really important for people who are considering running for a title, one of the first things that they ask you in your interview, almost invariably, is whether or not you are out or whether or not you are prepared to be out. Because as a spokesperson, despite the fact that you are traveling to kink events, you are choosing to put on a more public face for your community, and so there are risks that if you are not out, you are prepared to take. I know some people who use the title as a means of coming out, in terms of being, knowing that this was going to do it, and then saying, well, because we're running for a title, we're going to come out. I'm thinking of one specific master-slave couple that chose to do that. But there's, again, if these are things that you're not prepared to take on, because, I know in Gypsy's particular case, IPC is a fairly small event with a few hundred people, whereas, say IML has, 17 or 20,000 people that attend. She had something like 90 friend requests on Facebook in 2 days.
And it's hard to stay under the radar when...
Yeah, exactly. So if you're not prepared to be a public face and have people, asking you questions and being recognized everywhere you go, because, you have to understand, it's not just I'm choosing to go to event A, I'm choosing to go to event A and be polite to everybody who has a question. It's not like even being a rock star, because rock stars can blow people off, right? As a title holder, you are actually representing something, and you don't have that luxury.
Right. And I've seen people run for titles for the wrong reasons, and I've seen some lousy title holders, and I've seen some bad decisions when it comes to this. But I think that the sort of the golden reason why I would ever say to somebody, this is something that you might consider doing, running for a title to represent, that there is a process, and it's a valuable process for some people to be able to communicate to a panel of judges for yourself, for your own personal growth, whether it's as a leather boy, or whether it's as a Ms. Leather contestant, a boot black, a master and slave couple. It doesn't matter. You're going to be forced to itemize, to get into the nitty-gritty of what you're about, what you're into, what gets you off, why you do this at all, why you're interested in a title, why, and these are questions that your average kinkster probably won't ask themselves or be asked. Yeah. Unless, and so there is a process here that not just what you're into, but that you be able to articulate that to people who, to some esteemed judges, so that they can understand this. I think that there is great value in that for people in their sort of personal growth, for their own benefit, whether it's defining themselves, introspection to really figure out the reasons why they do what they do, or why they have this type of thing with their partner. I think that's the best reason to run for a title. But there is some controversy there as well, and that is, are these titles to recognize outstanding leather people, or are these titles to create outstanding leather people? And it seems to me like there's a little bit of both that goes on in these contests, that there are some where it's like, well, yeah, like 10 years of community service and advocacy, and even if it's just just being there and just being a kind person, they're just like, yeah, they're our leather contestant, they're somebody we're proud of, and they already are a spokesperson before we put this sash on them.
Correct.
Then there's also, go ahead.
I would hope that those things are not mutually exclusive. Whether you're a good leather person or a bad leather person going into it, I would hope that the process still makes you a better leather person, because it's not like you can become too self-aware. If it's a
Right.
practice in self-awareness, or it's a practice in, humility, or whatever it is, there's still room to grow, I think, even for someone who's well established with this very long record of service, or, positive impression on the leather community.
Right. But
And,
somebody who has already articulated those things at great length over the years will have an easier time about it, I think. They will still, meet people and grow, and a lot of positive things will happen to them because of this. But
right, but you
it,
raise an interesting point, because I have seen in one particular case a contestant who won a title and dropped out because ultimately their representation, their understanding of what they were, I guess really what they were, didn't line up. This was a person who had won a leather title and then came out on Facebook blasting a bunch of people not really being a good person, and sort of getting chastised behind the scenes, and eventually this continued to grow until there was this huge blow up where they basically said, fuck leather people, they all suck, when really they were just expecting quality character from this person. So
well,
it was interesting.
yeah, and it's I mean, this happens too, that there are a panel of judges. And like I said, I've seen some lousy title holders. I've seen some people who play to the judges who win the title and then do nothing positive with it, or they're just straight up lying because they feel like, I want the sash, I want the recognition, this will get me some clout, or this will get me play, or and those are the wrong reasons to run for titles, obviously. And I think through the pressure cooker, there are only a few of those people that do actually come through with a title, or a title of a certain echelon, an international title, for instance. So I don't know. I mean, I'm split. I've been to so many leather contests. I've judged one. I've dated title holders. I know what's involved in the preparation and all the travel and the obligations. And yeah, I've been asked to run for titles, and let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about, we're talking about leather titles, and Shane, you said earlier that there are titles that are not leather, or more pansexual in nature. I've been in arguments about this, that when if I say, well, I'm not really a leather person, leather isn't something that interests me, I'm not part of that. I'm adjacent to it, and I'm kin to it, and I'm cool with it, but it's not me. So, is there a track for me? And people say, well, yeah, there's Olympus leather. You're a straight guy. You could be, Mr. Olympus leather. Well, that's Olympus leather, and it's
Still a leather title.
yeah, it's a leather title, and people are saying, well, what about the puppy contests? Okay, Gypsy, tell me about your puppy contest. Do you need to be a leather person to be international puppy?
No.
Is the contest judged by leather people?
It can be, yes. The entire panel was not made of leather people. I'm trying to think. I think at least 3 or 4 of the judges I can think of off the top of my head were of leather thing, but a lot of the puppy community is not based in leather.
Right.
So it's not designed to be a leather title.
One of her judges was a drag queen, for example.
Yeah.
Right. And I had part of this conversation, they were saying, well, there's International Miss Little or something like that. And okay, that's not a leather contest.
Correct.
But it's judged. I looked at the judges. They were all leather judges, and it was attached to a leather event. And I was like, all right, well, okay, maybe it's not about, I mean, I would hope that the judging isn't leather. But it seems to me that there isn't a whole lot of this is a leather culture thing. It comes from leather culture. There aren't too many avenues for non-leather people.
Correct.
And until you find them specifically.
Correct.
I think in a way, though, of looking at it, though, and you've kind of said it yourself, that it's hard sometimes to find judges. And so if you are, in theory, a producer that's producing some of these contests, in general that people that identify as a leather person typically tend to carry themselves with a different moral or ethic code that may be something that you're desiring in a judge. And so that may be just who you've looked to, and that there are a lot of leather contests. And so if you're looking for people that have previously won contests or have been involved in contests, then you're going to have a larger pool of quote-unquote leather people to pick from than you would, say, non-leather contestant winner, kind of people.
Sure. Well, and I realized I said I judged a leather contest. I did, but I also realized that I wasn't high on the list of prospects. It was like, shit, who are we gonna get? It's a small contest. It's it's a local contest. We'll trick him into doing it.
But like you said, though, Michael, the contest. When you talk about are there any non-leather contests, I think we're going to see more and more of them. But the reality of it is that the contest circuit, at least in terms of kink, has come out of the leather community.
Right.
And then what has happened is making a determination about whether or not the title that you are running for, does it really qualify under the leather umbrella? And that's really what happened with a lot of the puppy contests. A lot of the puppy contests grew out of existing leather contests because you had the judges there and a lot of the contestants came out of the leather community. But now you are seeing puppy contests splitting off separately and becoming their own sort of non-leather contests.
One of the examples that was given to me was International Power Exchange. That's
Correct.
Not a master and slave thing. It's not a leather title, but it's at an event called Beyond Leather and judged 100% by leather people. So you can find those. If you are a power exchange couple, you are a kinky, maybe heterosexual, it doesn't really matter. If you just have a power exchange dynamic between you and your partner, you can run for a title. It's not a requirement that you be leather per se, but as it is right now, because these have sort of sprouted from the leather community, it's probably going to be at a leather event full of leather people, judged by leather people,
right,
etc.
But
and
again,
hopefully they're not, hopefully at the Little Miss Little contest, they're, even though they may be leather people who are judging, that is not the focus, because if that's not the purpose of the title, then they shouldn't be asking you questions about the hanky code, for instance.
But it's interesting because even Power Exchange, as you mention it, came out of the leather community, out of this realization that an entire subset of relationship styles wasn't represented by the master-slave title.
Right.
Right? So you say, okay, well, we have a title for master-slave, and you have huge numbers of people who don't identify as master-slave saying, well, that title doesn't, we're not going to run for that title because it doesn't really apply to us. And in fact, the first year that they ran International, they had a bit of an issue because a self-identified master-slave couple did run, and there was some argument about whether or not they should be there because there's already a master-slave title track.
Right.
And so the argument was basically made, well, you can't call it Power Exchange and then exclude certain Power Exchange relationships.
Right. And that could be Daddy Girl, it could be Sir and Boy, even though they have their own title tracks. What else can we say about leather titles? I mean, I'm just thinking of the viewership here, and I'm trying to, I hope we've given a good idea that these things exist, for one. What their purpose, or why they exist in the community, why somebody would want to run for a title. Are there any pieces of this that we're missing?
I think one thing that I would want to add is if people are unfamiliar with leather titles, it's definitely something that if you've never been to one, I would recommend going to, even if you just go to a local, like a bar title, because at least it gives you a sense of what's going on, right? You understand the process. Even at a small level. Like if you go to a bar contest, the whole contest usually happens in one night. So it's a fairly quick process. It'll start at, say, 9, at least for the stuff that attendees can see. We'll start at 9 and kind of end at midnight. And then it gives you an opportunity to see what kind of process, and as you said, what kind of preparation people go through to run for a title, because very rarely, and you'll see it sometimes at bar titles, do people just kind of get asked to run and walk up on stage. I mean, there's a lot that goes into running, and the longer you're in that title track, or the higher the level, like going from, say, a bar to an international title, or from a state to a regional title, the competition does get stiffer, so the expectations get higher. And
Yeah, I
so it's
agree.
interesting.
I agree 100%. If you have never seen a leather contest, you should see a leather contest. Just to see what it's about. Even if you say that's not for me, or I think
Right.
this is stupid, or whatever, that you go and be a part of, as an attendee.
Mhm.
Or a volunteer if you want to know what some of the inner workings are. Nobody's going to turn you down as a volunteer. I guarantee you that. Um, but I think, and it is a path for some people. It is not a path for others. But I think if you go, then you'll be able to have a look at it and decide for yourself whether that's something
And none of us are
that's
getting
worth
paid
doing.
to recruit people to contest. I'm not trying, and I know Michael's not trying to sell anybody on, you must go to all the leather events, you must go, to all the titles. But I think that as a member, even of a kink or pansexual community, it is an opportunity to see how another subsection of your community operates.
Yes. And you'll meet people that you haven't met before. And you'll see people from your kink community in their leather and among leather people. And it's kind of interesting.
And leather events have a different feel than kink events.
They do.
Yeah.
They're different kind of things. So
But
check
there's
it
enough
out.
common language. I mean, you can still have a. It's not like completely being in a foreign country. You can get around.
Yeah.
That's true. It's like going to Great Britain. You can,
Yeah. Yeah.
you still know the
It's
language,
exactly like that.
but when they say get off the pavement, you don't really. You're like, oh, the sidewalk. Okay, my bad.
Yeah. They drive on the wrong side of the road, but they still have cars.
Right. Yes. So I think we'll just kind of leave it there and move on to our next topic, which I think is a closely related topic because we're going to talk a little bit about community recognition. And aside from leather contests, which are obviously a mechanism for recognition in leather communities, let's talk a little bit about, and that's encompassed in this conversation, but let's talk a little bit about community recognition in pansexual or just sort of kink community spaces. What kind of recognition is available to you, for instance?
Well, if I can make a distinction, what's really interesting is that when we talk about leather titles, we are talking about people who are making a choice to be judged in a sort of a very specific sort of environment, right? You understand there's going to be judges, there are expectations, going in what's there. But what I have found interesting is that when we talk about recognition, and there's a few things running through my head in terms of what some of those recognitions are, it's generally people who are picked out of the community as opposed to applying for that kind of opportunity. So generally it's people who are not aware that they are being recognized for something.
Right, because in the pansexual kink community, we don't have this mechanism that's, this machine that's already in place for, running for titles and have that available. So it comes in more subtle ways. I mean, at the Louisville Munch, we have a recognition. We call them the Munchies Awards, and we allow attendees and folks in the community to vote for the people. It's kind of like that, senior high school thing, most likely to succeed. We have some real ones, like the best educator, for instance, but there's some silly ones too. We got the hottest ass, those are fun ones. But
aren't those coming up soon?
Yes, they are. We have an anniversary.
Oh yeah.
We have an anniversary coming up. But so we do them every year around our anniversary. That's something that I saw another group do. They handed out these little trophies, and everybody, puts in their ballot. And I thought it was pretty fantastic. I decided to steal the idea because I think that there are ways that we can recognize, and have some fun. It was a good experience for the community. And isn't it nice when you are recognized, even if it's for the best tits in the room? You still go, oh, thank
Really?
But to say, for instance, we have like the model dominant. Okay, this is somebody that other people look to as, that people look up to, and when you win that award, you get to say, wow, you didn't nobody nominated you, you didn't throw your hat in the ring or anything. You can say, hey, isn't that nice? People think I have my shit together, isn't it? Aren't I glad they don't know any better? But aside from, I mean, those are specific ways that we recognize in our small community. Um, what are other ways, and should we be striving for more recognition in our community?
You raise an interesting point. The dilemma is the one problem with titles versus recognition, as I said, is that people who run for titles are running for the titles. And so there's a lot of people who are cynical who will say, well, they're running for a title because they wanted the recognition.
Right.
And it
There's
might
some
not
kind of agenda or some bad reason that they
right, and
want that title.
it might not be a recognition they would have gotten if they hadn't thrown their hat into the ring. And so I think that there's this sort of sense of recognition where you are chosen for something rather than sort of being asked to be looked at for these kinds of things. And I can think of some fairly big ones where people cannot volunteer themselves for recognition. And one of the big ones, of course, is Mama's Family.
Right.
For people who are unfamiliar, it's Sandy Mama Reinhardt out in San Francisco, who has raised millions of dollars for various charities, mostly LGBT related, started this thing where she started recognizing people in the community for the work that they did by initiating people into her family. And you get a pin with that, and you are actually added to a list, and they have pictures at every event and all that. But ultimately, you can only be in Mama's Family if you are nominated to be in there and are selected to be in that, and it's always based on community service. It's essentially a community service award. This is for people who have done things like, run fundraisers or started new groups or, sort of been active in their communities in terms of bringing people in or expanding their communities. But I'm a big fan in many ways of Mama's Family because it is a recognition of what you have done actively to support your community.
Mm-hmm. There are organizations out there that have boards of directors, and sometimes people will be nominated to sit on those positions. Generally, it's another one of those title things. Somebody will run for vice president of an organization. So again, it's not always like something that's just recognized. It's like they have a reason for wanting to be involved with the management of a group. But sometimes people are nominated and rise to the occasion, and that for people that say, we'd like you to help organize our group, we'd like you to be a leader in this group. That's one way of recognizing people, to nominate or to, even if it's convince or bribe or whatever you need to do to get valuable people or people that you think are worthwhile to help further your community. I guess that's the best word for it. That is one way that you can recognize people. I think another way that we recognize people in our communities is through education. Those people who we ask to teach.
Uh-huh.
And that's always a flattering thing as well. When somebody says, hey, we think you're the authority on this particular topic and we'd like you to bestow your wisdom on everyone else. They're putting you up there as recognizing you as an expert in a topic or as a good educator. You may not even be the expert, but you're the best teacher.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. A lot of the recognition that happens in a kink community is really informal. And I think a lot of that has to do with this idea that kinky people generally don't come into the community with the end goal of community service and giving back and things of that nature. Typically, you're the weirdest weirdo in your sandbox, and you want to hang out with some people who are equally weird, if not weirder than you, because it's kind of nice to have that kind of camaraderie with another person, right? The second you walk into a kink community, that guy knows something about something that you know about, and you're kind of bonded by that. So you don't want people to come into community for the title, because it kind of defeats the purpose of building community. But I think what a lot of people find when they do come into community is that when you do put forth the effort to build it, there's always something new to learn, and there's always something new to gain from just socializing and being around a lot of other people. So you do maybe become a top educator in a certain subject. You didn't go into it thinking, I'm going to be a great educator. You just had a set of skills that other people found valuable. Um, so you do get recognized to come and present about different things, or people tend to reach out to you a lot and say, I see that you have this really highly functional power exchange relationship, and I'd really love your input and your advice on it. And I think it is nice that smaller communities like ours do recognize them in very informal ways. A certificate with a piece of paper is not the same as a patch. But it's a
That's
really
true.
nice gesture that people get together and they say, you're a great educator, or you're just a ray of sunshine, or whatever it is. I think it really bolsters this whole idea of community.
I'm
Yeah,
just imagining the back patch that says Dungeon Rat on it, because that is one of the awards that we have, is for the
I
person
want one
most
that says ray
likely.
of sunshine. That seems super badass.
We have
hey, I
one
know
that
a
is for
guy.
the
If you
people
want
most likely
patches, I
to.
know a guy.
No,
Yeah,
I want to win it, Shane.
I know a guy, but we also have 33 awards, so can I get some kind of wholesale discount on that shit?
Another one though, Michael, is along the same lines. Is I know people get asked to do keynote speeches at events,
Okay.
which is generally a really good one because they're actually advertised. Like in some way teachers are, but it's usually a separate thing. On most weekend events, they'll have a keynote brunch on the Sunday, and it's sort of a point of advertisement, like, oh, we have X coming to speak. You don't want to miss it. And generally speaking, and I've never heard of anybody otherwise, they are invited to speak because of their experience in the community or because they have, a specific story to share that's relevant to that group.
hmm So, do you think, as far as when we're talking about the difference between leather contests, judging, or the Pantheon Awards, for instance, where they have a almost formalized, or let's say well established mechanism for recognizing excellence in community. Do you think that the kink community at large would benefit from something like that? Is it I don't know. Is that something that kinky people are interested, or are we just kind of there to kind of do our shit and have some fun?
I'm really on the fence about it because I think everybody likes to be recognized for something, but as soon as recognition becomes the goal, people get fucking weird. Like the
Yeah.
one thing that's nice about random recognition is it's generally people who are being recognized for things they are doing for the sake of them being done. And I'm a big fan of that. But I have heard a number of people talk about various awards or various types, like you said, Pantheon, who will say, well, I wonder if I'm ever going to win a Pantheon award. And you think, that's exactly the attitude that will keep you from winning something like that because you're not in it for the right reasons.
Right. So if you're campaigning for a Pantheon Award,
Yeah, and
that would be my first clue that maybe you shouldn't be the one.
Right, but I think that if you are feeling like your contributions aren't valuable because you haven't been recognized, then you're probably missing the point of the service that you're providing. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's a lot of people who put in a lot of work who sometimes feel like they're not appreciated for the work that they do. And I think that that's very, very much a natural sort of thing. But there's a difference between having those sort of low moments where you think, man, I've been doing this for years, and I don't feel like I've, not so much as a thank you, blah, blah, blah. And I think that that's, there's a certain amount of that's okay. I think that's human nature. But I think to get involved with something, to say, I really want to start a group because I want to win the small group award from Pantheon, you're in it for the wrong reasons.
I agree. So you're on the fence about this because if there is an official mechanism in place, or let's say a circuit, local, regional, national, for these types of things, community volunteerism, excellence in education, et cetera, for non-leather folks, then it could create a an environment of people doing things for the wrong reasons, or hoping for the title, or in preparation, because I've seen that too. I've seen people who, as far as like the leather title community, the leather title circuit, people doing things that they wouldn't normally do because they know that they're getting ready to go and put themselves on display. So suddenly we're seeing them at a lot more things, and suddenly they're volunteering for things, and suddenly, so it's kind of like applying for the job, and you're putting your best foot forward, and but that's still helpful. That's still good for the community. Maybe it's not for the best reason.
And I understand that though, Michael. But there's a difference between doing that and saying, I'm putting my best foot forward, and I'm going to go back and delete all of my old Facebook pictures because I don't think they fit into the model of what it is that I'm trying to win. There's a certain revamping of people that happens sometimes. Like a reimagining that happens. And we live in a world where I've seen that right down to people changing their names because we're okay with scene names. So all of a sudden, when you've been a bottom your whole life, and all of a sudden you're coming out as a pro dom, as Mistress Raven Thorn or whatever the fuck you're going by, like there's this whole reimagining because you have this impression that that recognition for some reason grants you a greater degree of access or of stature. If we had no mechanism for recognizing people in a formal sense, then everything that people do, we understand they're doing because they want to do it.
Yeah, but can't it go the other way? Sure, it can turn some people into power-mongering assholes with a very distinct case of split personality, but can't it also encourage people to become their better selves, to put forth the best version of themselves, to be a role model? Because there's a certain pressure in leather communities to uphold some of those values just by virtue of being in the community. That just happens to be a difference between leather and kink, and any honest person will tell you that's how it feels when you're in the middle of those communities. In a kink community, you don't feel that pressure. If you want to go and act a fool at a play party or at a community event, you can act a fool. You might not get any play, but, you're not necessarily going to be shamed to the degree that you might have been shamed at a leather event. So running for a title or knowing a title exists in some capacity within that community, couldn't it make you better, not worse?
Right. So when people are talking about integrity, doing the right thing when nobody's watching is that's a great way to say it, because it's not just doing the right thing or helping out or volunteering because you're being watched. That you're running for a title or you want to be recognized for this or that. It still has a positive effect on the person's actions. It's just that it's not necessarily for the right reasons, I guess.
I do have to say, though, in this particular case, and maybe for the sake of full disclosure, I should probably put in my own bias here or express my own bias that I have a real thing for authenticity, right? When there are no cards on the table, when there are no bets being made and people are who they are, I just have a genuine sense of what they're doing. As Josie said, in the leather community, you don't have to run for a title. And there's a lot of people who know that those titles are there but choose not to run for a title because it's not important to them. The work is important to them. And for me, and this is just a personal thing, I just like to know the authentic people. Like, I like the people who go unrecognized because I know that their heart is in it. And I know some people who don't have access to formal recognition, as you said, whether they're not gay so they can't really run for a leather title, or they don't qualify under some of those leather title rules, who still try to find ways to elevate themselves, right? Like, so-and-so is hosting said event, right? And, their name is bigger than the name of the event. You know what I mean? Like, there's a certain amount of elevation that they want to do, where the more often they get their name called, and I can even think of people in our local community that do that. Like, they want to be the expert. And they will tell you that they are the expert, right? We don't need the community to vet them because they've told us in no uncertain terms that they are the leading authority on this particular subject.
Ray's laughing.
I'm not saying that a lot of
you might know somebody that resembles that remark. That's all I'm saying.
But the people that tend to be more quiet about what they do tend to be the people that I gravitate towards, because I know that they're in it for, I don't want to say the right reasons, certainly their own reasons, but generally speaking, public recognition is not one of those reasons. And I always feel great when those people do get recognized publicly, but generally speaking, I know that that's not why they're there.
Yeah, but it's the gold standard. We want everybody to do good deeds at the kindness of their heart, and because it's the right thing to do. And whatever other reason, like happy, sunshiny Boy Scout reasoning we can think of. But if someone, it's kind of like in Kink, where some people are, they do service to their community because they get off on other people petting them and telling them they're great, and like the warm fuzzy feels they get from other people experiencing that service. They didn't do it because it's the selfless, it's the selfless thing to do. They did it for a selfish motivation, but I don't necessarily know that I agree that that cheapens the thing that they did. So maybe they did a fundraiser only because they wanted it publicly to be seen that they did a fundraiser for Gypsy, and they wanted everyone to recognize them for being awesome. Well, they still raised the funds. Everyone still had a good time. I don't know that it cheapens that.
Right, and to be fair, though, I did say that that was a personal bias. Right? I mean, that's my opinion. I realize that it's not necessarily, because, I mean, from a value perspective, I understand that if somebody is doing something good, they've hosted an event for 5 years. Now, they better get invited to the annual banquet of great volunteers, but you still have this event that they're running. Right? Like, and I understand that value. But, I mean, it's interesting because one of the things that we talk about a lot in the Kink community, and this came up at ShibariCon a couple of years ago, was this notion about people who host events that everybody loves. Like, oh my God, this event is great. The producers do a great job. Not titles, just a great event that they run. And then someone finds out that the producer made $8 last year, and they're all like, oh, ripping off the community, thieves, right? I mean, God, how could they even imagine making a profit off of our backs? And I'm just like every restaurant we have a munch at, like there's not some motivation there. So I understand that people have different motivation.
Shane, when was the last time somebody asked you to make them a flogger and just for free? Just like, well, just out of the goodness of your heart.
Every week.
Every week. Just give me a flogger.
No, but because I do a lot of stuff. I donate a lot of stuff to baskets, and that's where I had started originally when I was making stuff. Is I personally didn't necessarily feel real comfortable at the beginning selling my stuff, so I used to give a lot of my stuff away because you'd have local title holders who are trying to fill baskets. Whatever, like, all right, if you're just giving it away and it's just going to be auctioned, I'll give you something. But that got my name out. But I was giving it away because people were asking me for stuff, and I was happy to help. I wasn't making a profit off of it. But now, because I had done so much stuff for baskets, I have people I don't know calling me saying, oh, I hear you're the basket guy. Like, I don't fucking know who you are.
Now everybody knows you're the charitarian. but and there's something to that too, Shane. I mean, you do give a certain amount of things away, but now there's there's the added sort of like getting your name out there. People when people go through the baskets and they say, here's what you're bidding on, and this is a wonderful single tail from a braided leather. Or put your business cards out there or something like that. That can be a good business move. But yes, when people find out that you made some money at an event or something, or the reason why Claw, people have such good feels about that is because all of their proceeds go into charity. And I don't quite understand, but the evil in making $8 on an event, but when it doesn't really apply to anything else.
Like I said, that's the example I gave. This is ShibariCon. When people found out that the owners of ShibariCon were making a profit, well, God help, it was only one day later when they found out that the people who ran ShibariCon weren't even real rope people. And I was trying to wrap my head around, like, what makes you a real rope person?
Yeah, and that makes the whole event suck ass, right? Who wants to go to that?
But that's what happened. There was this huge thing, like, oh, I'm not going to support them because I don't want to spend $150. On an event where someone's making a profit. They could just charge me $145 and not make a profit. Well, why the fuck would they want to run that event?
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize that producers take a risk. You know, when you book a hotel, you're making a confirmation to them that you're going to hand them a certain amount of dollars. You know, and so you have to be able to charge people to make that. And if you make, for some producers, I know that if they make a profit, great. But they don't aim to make a profit. They just aim to break even so they can host the event. But motivation becomes a huge factor. You know, and that's why I was saying, for me personally, I like to know what's motivating people to do things.
So right, when you're recognizing an event producer, for instance, and saying, you know, these people have contributed a lot to look at this event that they've been holding for the last 10 years, and isn't it wonderful, and hasn't it been great for our community? You are going to have those people that say, well, they've made, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars. They're not doing it for the good of the community. But as Josie says, isn't that okay too? If it's a good event and they're doing, even if they're doing it for mixed motivations, you know, or a variety of reasons, isn't that still worth recognizing?
Than not do the right things at all.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I'm probably paradoxical here, but I have two motivations, right? If people say I'm just doing this because it's important for me to do it, yay. And if people say I'm doing it because I think I can make a fucking dollar, yay. You know what I mean? Like,
and the answer is both. You can't have two at the same time.
Right. But I think for me, though, personally, I just want to know that the motivation for that is authentic. And if somebody is like, I don't give a shit about kinky people, but kinky people got money and I can fill an event with them. And I've seen that with people who produce swingers events. You know, non-swingers who are like, I've got a space, they want to pay for it, I see an opportunity, great. Because now the swingers have a place to go where they can do whatever it is that they want to do. And like I said, as long as, for me personally, I understand the motivation, and when there is this arbitrary recognition, a lot of times I don't know what the motivation is. And for some people that doesn't matter, right? And as Josie mentioned, the people who go to a lot of pan events don't even know who the producers are. They're just like, doors open at 7, I'm there, I paid my money, there's a dungeon, and when I'm done I leave, right? But
True.
I've always been interested in the underpinnings. You know, what's holding this event up? You know, a lot of times with an event, you know, it's a single producer, and if they go away, that event's going away. We saw that with the original Kentucky Leather Pride. You know, when the producer stops running it, there's no one there to pick up that slack. And so I'm always interested to see, you know, is this event going to keep going? You know, especially events that I like.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, I want to know that it's going to keep going. And if people are in it for the money, and then one year an event kind of doesn't do real well, there's always that question about whether or not the event's going to be there the next year.
Well, and I still think that I still just don't think I care that much about the motivation of why people do things, but I do feel very strongly about service to your community, to your, you know, all these things that we could honor with a title. I do feel strongly about those, but, you know, I assume that there's a selfish motivation behind most of those things. You know, it makes me feel good to volunteer at an event. That's not necessarily a selfless motivation of mine. I like the warm fuzzies that I get from volunteering, but if I'm the person coordinating volunteers, I don't care. I don't care what
if you're giving tons of money to the Easter Seals.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're giving tons of money to the Easter Seals, and you're, you know, and that makes you feel good, and it means that you can write it off on your taxes or tell your other friends about it or something, you know, those are other motivations. But you still did give money to a charity, you know.
Yeah, which is great. And I do think that, you know, if we were giving titles for those deeds, we are probably a lot more likely to give it to the person who seems like they're much more selfless and they have a lot more humility and all of that. But I don't think it cheapens the deed, and I don't think that it shouldn't be recognized.
Yeah.
Well, we see that all the time with volunteers who volunteer because they get 50% off their registration. So technically they're not really volunteering. It's just a way to get around minimum wage restrictions, I think.
Yeah, I do that too. You know, people that volunteer at our parties do get paid, but not very much. It's pretty much slave wages, and some people are kind of thrilled by that idea.
But I guess, again, I mean, just not to beat the point to death, but I've met a number of people who have volunteered for events and then had the volunteer coordinators come by and say, "Oh, thank you for volunteering. Here's a $20 coupon for next year's event," and they went, "Wow, really? Like, I get stuff for volunteering.
But isn't that a great way to recognize? I mean, I try to do that
Hey,
in our
right.
community when you're talking about volunteering. And some of the best recognition that I've gotten is from an individual who comes through the door. I mean, even at a munch, where they say, you know, I recognize that you put some of yourself into this, and you don't have to do this, and you don't get paid to host the munches, but you do it, and thank you. And I say, damn, that's gold. That really, you know, it does. It makes it worthwhile. And I try to, you know, pass that along to volunteer. You know, thank you for volunteering. I recognize that you didn't have to, and you did, and I appreciate it. And it's those subtle things. And we don't have titles, and yeah, we have awards in our little neck of the woods here every year. But even without those, I think that, you know, recognition comes in very small forms, and that the more, and it doesn't have to come from someone who is, you know, a pillar of a celebrity, royalty, you know, who's been around forever. It doesn't have to be from those people in order to feel good to that person, to say, you know, you're you know, staffing the registration desk. Thanks for stepping up to do that. It's
Right.
That's all.
What's interesting about that, though, Michael, is the flip side of that again, and this is one of the reasons why I like motivation as a concept, is that for every one person that does that, specifically for you, I know there are 85 people going, well, you didn't really post that early enough for me to make plans. Like, as a free volunteer to the community kind of person, you're sort of sucking in all of the free stuff that you do. So if you could coordinate those events that I don't pay for better, that would be awesome of you.
If I do, well,
You know what I mean?
I think you
Point out
lost me
the
there.
assholes,
No.
right? Not the people who deserve recognition.
No.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is
Clarifying.
that, no. When we talk about motivation, though, right? Like a person like yourself, Michael, who does all of these events, you know, and hosts all of these things, you know, you get this one person who says thank you, but whether it be online or in person, you get 90 people who are complaining about the free service that they're getting.
Which
Right.
makes you mean that much more.
It
Right, but
does.
that's what I'm saying. That's why I like this
I know I'm
sense of.
helping to translate you because it sounded a little funny.
Well, it was interesting in the leadership forum at FetLife. They were saying, you know, maybe we should come up. You know, there's a flag for everything in our community. There's a master slave flag, and there's a leather boy flag, and there's a puppy flag, and there's a boot black flag. We should have a, you know, community leadership patch, you know, a design, and you could wear it and be proud, and, you know, some sort of recognition for people who do these things in the community. And I had to laugh. I was like, oh, whatever, you know. But then the next the next response to it was, yeah, it'll be a patch we could wear on our backs, and it'll be circular, and it'll look like a target, and everybody can wear that around.
Yeah.
I was like,
Sure.
it made me laugh. So I think, you know, as we've been having this conversation, some communities do it better than others. I think I think that I like the Munchies Awards thing that we do. It's a nice thing, but I'm not advocating for some sort of, you know, leather title type tract for recognition for these things. But I do, you know, for the people in the room and for the viewership, a little bit goes a long way, and I think it would be nice if you know, these communities that are held together really by volunteers, that we recognize those things, and not just the leadership. I'm talking about the person who's taking the garbage out at the end of the night because they were asked to. They were asked to pitch in, and they said, yeah, I'm gonna sweep the floor, or I'm gonna invite somebody that wouldn't have otherwise heard about this thing. Those are all, you know, worthy of recognition, and I try to do that when I can. But I think if we just kind of concentrated on those subtle things, I think our communities would be better places. Anything we can add? Do we cut it here? All right. We'll shut this one down, and thank you to the panel, to the viewership, for another amazing episode of the Kink Tank. We'll see you in a couple weeks with something new and fresh to talk about. So good night.